We'd be much better off solving the issue around fentanyl so that it doesn't come back with high punitive tariffs, and then getting an election so that we can get someone at the table to do the brass tacks negotiation for the next 4 years.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was on with Vassy on the CTV Power Play. Now, Danielle Smith, of course, is getting a lot of credit for having a decrease on the energy tariffs. And of course, she has much stronger ties with the Donald Trump administration than anybody in the federal Liberal government. So it seemed that Vassy couldn't decide. She sort of, moved around from subject to subject, whether she wanted to blame Vassy on not being strong enough against the demands of Donald Trump, or whether she decided that Danielle Smith wasn't going to look after the other parts of Canada strong enough, which I find to be quite weird when you consider how many sections of Canada have yelled at Alberta for simply producing oil. Now, all of a sudden, they're all like, save us, Alberta, save us. It's kind of strange. It's kind of a bad look, too. I mean, if you're going to be strong, you want to have a position, you want to be one of these strong and independent far left people, stick to it. Don't then all of a sudden, as soon as the thing don't go your way, start yelling and screaming that it's up to somebody else to solve your problems. That's my opinion. Anyway, in the end, Danielle Smith had to put Vassy in her place, and it was pretty good to watch. There's very few people that Vassy has on her show that she can't at least keep up with. And it was very evident that Danielle Smith simply, took her to task.
I think that there's two conversations we're having with the U.S. administration. One conversation is the tariffs related to fentanyl. And the second conversation is all of the irritations that the administration has with the CUSMA agreement. And I don't think we should intermingle those two. I think we've got to address the fentanyl issue to avoid the 25% tariffs. And then the second stage is having an election so we can have a government who can spend 4 years renegotiating the CUSMA. I think if we try to intermingle those two, then we're not going to satisfy the concerns around fentanyl. So I'd like to stay focused on fentanyl, make some progress in the next 30 days, and then hope we can move on to the next stage when we've got a new elected government at the federal level.
I'll be honest with you. I agree with her that we need a government in place now. We need an election now. And the longer that the Liberals delay, the less likely they are to have an election. They seem to be scared of the results. They don't want to follow the democratic process. Further, I believe that the carbon tax that the Liberal government lays bare or has placed on Canada sort of exposes the reality of our free trade with Mexico, how Mexican food can be grown in Mexico and then put on a truck or a train and dragged across the continent and then put back into a truck and delivered to the store and still sold to you for less money than Canadian grown produce. There's not something not right there. Now, I'm not trying to slam Mexican products, but I believe that Canadian products should be at least as affordable. No? Does that not make sense? I mean, of course, with the carbon tax put on all of our farmers and all of the people that produce food, we can't ever hope to compete with that. So there are some issues that we have inside of this, whatever they're calling it now, the NAFTA agreement, that we should actually go back to the table with.
There will be an election, though, before those negotiations are supposed to start in earnest.
Is the ability for a new prime minister to try to negotiate a new deal with either the Bloc or the NDP to stay in until October. We also know our Constitution allows for an election that could be held as late as October 2026. I think that would be very damaging to the country. I just want to make sure everyone knows my view.
All the way as far as October 2026, I want one today, right now. I don't trust the Liberal government, though. Knowing that they have all of those possibilities, I absolutely don't trust Jagmeet Singh to say, oh, no, we got to do what's best for the people and let the cards fall where they may. Jagmeet Singh is all over the internet screaming how he wants to have a war with the United States. I mean, a guy who's never been in a fist fight in his life shouldn't be talking about war like he understands it in any way, shape, or form. A guy who's never had to go hungry shouldn't be talking about an economic imbalance as some sort of conflict between one country and another. Well, a country that's a tenth the size population-wise. And the economy is nowhere near as strong as the weakest aspect of the United States of America. But, as soon as Mark Carney says, oh no, it's a crisis and we can't have an election now because we're in the middle of a crisis and we'll just ask the House of Commons what they think. And Jagmeet Singh, of course, will throw his lot in with them because he just as badly wants to be in charge as much as the rest of them. Despite the fact that you can look around and see the damage that they've caused, they don't seem to want to accept that.
But the issue of fentanyl is not one that happened overnight. And I think we've talked before about not to take away anything from obviously the poisonous supply and the impact it's had on both Canadians and Americans' lives. But the data from border authorities in the US clearly shows that our border, when it comes to fentanyl, it's a fraction of the seizures that are happening overall at both borders. Were you making those points when you were talking about the border? Because the way that you've communicated around it seems to accept the characterization of the US, which is not based in fact.
Well, it's not helpful to tell the Americans, well, we've only provided you a supply that would kill 9.5 million Americans. That's not a persuasive argument, and I think we should stop using it. I think we need to understand Canada's problem is different. Canada had a big problem with TD Bank acting as a money launderer. They got a $3 billion fine. We've had our casinos in British Columbia act as money laundering. We have the issue of not actually examining containers when they come in on our ports. We don't examine every car that comes across the border. We have cars being stolen and stuffed with drugs and sent outside of Montreal ports. We've got packages coming across the border through Amazon that go unchecked. So just because we haven't found it, maybe it's because we don't have the processes in place to be able to find it. Maybe that's what the Americans are raising. And now we have an opportunity to address that because our people are dying too. And we shouldn't be complacent about that. We should want to work with them in our own interest to be able to stamp out the cartels as well.
Now, during that exchange at the beginning when Vassy was saying her very leading question, you could watch the face of Danielle Smith and her body language indicate that she didn't agree with what she had to say. And she was letting her finish, but she was, she had strong differences in the question. And obviously, by the way, the answer laid out off the cuff, right? There's no teleprompter or anything like that. She explained how there's many ways that things are getting into the border, and there's absolutely no way in the world that as Canadians we could know for sure that it's only 1% because we don't do enough of checking. We don't look strong enough, and we don't have any guarantees that these things that she listed, right, with the scanning, with the loading of the cars, with all of the other, the Amazon packages. Now, in Amazon's defense, I know they have a lot of warehouses inside of Canada. However, many of their products are manufactured in the United States and then put into Canada or in China and then brought into Canada. So there's some argument to that, though I would believe that Amazon does not want that sort of thing to be reflected onto their business. I believe that what she was saying is that there's a lot of stuff that crosses the border that's never looked at. Miles of train cars that don't get scanned because trains are always miles long, right? Or kilometers, depending on which language you prefer to use. I believe that she satisfied the question very well, but Vassy, she couldn't let it go. She had to continue. She had to try to, I don't know what she was after, an I gotcha moment, or if she had friends of hers whispering in her ear. I can't speak for what her motivation was. I can say with absolute certainty that she kind of went a little bit too far, and Danielle Smith didn't take kindly to it.
That takes away completely from the factual basis. Like, he wants to punish us in the same way he's punishing Mexico, predicated on some sort of pretext around the border, when it doesn't exist in the same way. Why don't you want to make that argument at all?
He wants us to recognize that Canada enjoys a very special relationship with the U.S. that no other country in the world enjoys, and just show the respect of taking seriously the fact that they've got people dying and they want it to stop. That's it. We should stop making excuses, stop saying, yeah, but we're not as bad as the other guys. We should just say, yes, we agree, and we're going to take care of our part of the issue so you don't have to worry about us anymore.
Well, Vassy, I have to say that I'm a little disappointed with your logic stream there. Let's just take the whole thing that you said about how Mexico's not as bad or as worse than Canada and transfer it to a different crime. Let's say it's one of a domestic situation. Does that mean the one guy is not as bad because the other situation happened more often or in larger degree? Let's use a little bit of common sense. Why
are presenting facts, though, excuses? Like the way you're describing it is just accept the way President Trump characterizes things and kind of roll over. I'm not sure Canadians would be comfortable with that.
Well, I'm not comfortable with the fact that over 1,000 people per year die in my province from fentanyl. I'm not comfortable with the fact that cartels are operating in my province. I'm not comfortable with the fact that I'm having to shut down super labs and drug houses. I'm not comfortable with that either. And so I'm not going to downplay the serious tragedy and loss of life in my province because of the Mexican cartels and this poisonous drug that has caused the addiction. So I see it a bit differently, I think, from you, Vassy. I think it's just as serious an issue for me in my province as it is for the Americans in their country, and that we've got to crack down on it, and this is our opportunity.
Well, you man, oh man, did she ever put her back in her place? It's rare to see Vassy Kapelos go silent like that. I have no idea why she all of a sudden wants to come after her with these far left images or these far left talking points. I don't believe that Donald Trump did anything that was unreasonable, and I believe that were the shoe on the other foot, Canadians would be screaming that we have to do it. When you consider all of the attacks that the far left has made on the right wing that now turn out to be true, I think that securing our border and making sure that in her reference, cartels or whatever Chinese people, are groups, organizations are importing fentanyl, no matter which way it goes, to stop them in their tracks requires something that the far left hates. Of course, it requires discipline. It requires polices. It requires people who are willing to go after the bad guys and do whatever it takes to get it done. And you're not going to hear people say to you, "Oh no, it's okay now that they're going to pass through the border, even though 9 million people could potentially be damaged from it." If it were anything else, if it were nail polish, the left wouldn't be saying that. If it were hairspray or hair dye, you'd be like, "Get it off the shelves right now." If it was lettuce, you'd be like screaming, "Get it away! Get it away! Get it away!" So why should this be different? Because the Liberal government and the far left wants to have safe supply in every city of Canada? I think we should be examining why that is. Now, right after this, Vassy became quite complacent and immediately switched the subject.
What do you think the chance of permanently escaping the application of these tariffs is?
Well, I think there's two tariffs. I think the fentanyl tariffs, the 2510 tariffs, will come back if we do not make serious efforts to reduce the number of deaths that are happening in the U.S. that we're responsible for with fentanyl. So I think we have to make sure that we take that part of it seriously. And then round two is a renegotiation of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, which hopefully a new government will get underway. We have to look at them as two different discussions we're having with the U.S. And it's probably going to be a hard negotiation, but it'll be a lot better to start that negotiation with a government that has a 4-year mandate.
I think it's a testament to Danielle Smith's capability that Vassy was coming at her with 3 or 4 different subjects, and she was able to roll with it without any pausing, without having to stall or delay or say, "Oh, we'll get back to you," or lie flat out. And despite Vassy Kapelos trying to make it all about Donald Trump, Danielle Smith made it all about getting a federal election into Canada. Now everybody knows that the Liberal government is on the way out, except for the Liberal government is manipulating the system so that they don't have to leave. That's not putting the needs of the Canadian people ahead of their own. That's putting their own needs ahead of the Canadian people. They should be looking, if on the one hand, Carney wants to call this a crisis, then why does he feel that he's the one that should be manipulating the system to be in charge of it? If it's a crisis, then let's find out who the Canadian people want to handle this crisis. Because the Liberal government has not been able to handle any crisis that they've been handed in the last 9 years with any proficiency. They have dropped the ball every single solitary time. And I know that Mark Carney's favorite trick is to just print money. So I don't believe that he has the skill set, or he definitely doesn't have the diplomacy to understand what's required. Whether or not they'll call that election, or whether they just try to say, "Oh, no, look, Jagmeet Singh supports us again, so we don't have to worry about having an election, and here we're going to pass all these laws quickly and rapidly so that Jagmeet Singh can, while he's still on our team," because Jagmeet Singh is obviously looking out for himself too. He doesn't, you heard him, you can hear him on the internet screaming about all the wrong things. If these guys are so sure of themselves, they wouldn't need to be trying to trick everybody into voting for them. They would simply say, "Okay, let's have an election right now. Let's let the people settle it," because it's the people that want to settle it. They, of course, are just looking out for themselves, obviously. Or they would be like, "You know what? We got to put aside all of this partisan stuff and have the election so the people could decide what they're looking for." I mean, Doug Ford went ahead and called an election. I know there are a lot of people that are upset, especially from the NDP and the Liberal provincial parties, that are mad that Doug Ford called this election. However, from a Canadian standpoint, it was a smart thing to do, because in the end, Ontario will have a 4-year mandate to deal with the Donald Trump administration. And obviously, the Republicans are probably going to win the next 2 elections after that, because they're the government that wants to give people jobs, right? Anyway, aside from that, what everybody seems to overlook is there are border crossings, and we keep track of how much money are crossing those borders. And the top four volume money per volume that are crossed from the United States into Canada are all in Southern Ontario. They are all in, I shouldn't say Southern Ontario, but they are all in Ontario. One of them is in Sudbury, one of them is in Windsor, and two of them go into New York. So two of them go into Michigan, and two of them go into New York in the Niagara area. Those are the four largest volume bridges. Like the amount of money that's coming across them in trucks is the four highest are in Canada, are in Ontario. So that Premier having a 4-year mandate is a smart idea. It's a good move. The same should hold true for Canada. The logic applies across the federal lines. Why should we be putting up with a broken government that has so many scandals, it's not even funny? Changing the leadership is not going to change the ideas. I mean, if they all supported Justin Trudeau, why would you want the stain of that being put onto you by saying, oh, no, now Mark Carney, they all support me? Why would you want that? But they don't seem to be looking at it like that. They're just, fixated on their green agenda. These guys cannot be trusted. They have changed their tune so many times. It just sounds like static at this point. If they were really looking out for the needs of the Canadian people, what they would tell themselves is it's not Donald Trump's fault, but let's just figure it out. Let's get an election in place so that the Canadian people can decide who they want to look after this issue. Of course, they're not doing that because they're only looking out for themselves. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.